failed to maintain your weapon, son.
Maintenance is important, vital in fact, if you want things to work. Whether it's your body, your mind, your car, or even your firearm. If it's neglected, it won't work, and particularly when you need it most. I'm just as guilty of this as anyone else. I failed to maintain my body, my house, my garden, my finances, my tax affairs, and even I realised when it blew its engine to pieces on the motorway in the middle of the night, my old Jag. I neglect all of these things, but there's one thing that I feel cannot be neglected anymore: my society. If you've been tuning in for a while, you'll know that I bang on about this all the time. If we don't maintain our society, it will fail us. If we don't maintain our freedom of speech, there will be no free speech allowed. Instead, there will be hate speech laws. We now have hate speech laws. If we don't maintain the idea of equality before the law, we will have sections of society that are more equal and more protected than others. We do now have sections of society that are more equal and vastly more protected than others. If we don't maintain the idea that we are free moral agents in a free society that still belongs to us, free to roam as we see fit, unencumbered and unmonitored by the state, we will be living in a totalitarian surveillance state. We now have more CCTV cameras per head of population than any other country in the world, more even than Russia, China, Iran or North Korea. We are here because we have failed to maintain our society. But maintaining our society doesn't just mean voting and protesting and challenging injustice and corruption and insisting that the powerful must be accountable to us rather than the other way round. Of course it means all of those things, but it also means the little things, the everyday things. It means doing the dull jobs that make a country strong, to quote Orwell. And it means standing up. It means standing up when you'd rather you didn't have to. It means standing up to an injustice when you really can't be bothered. It means, more than anything, getting involved. A day or two ago, on a Ryanair flight from Barcelona to Gatwick, thanks to a passenger who filmed it, we witnessed this.
I tell you, I hope somebody sits there, because I don't want to sit next to your sicky face. Your ugly fucking face. I'll tell you this, if you don't go to another seat, I'll push you to another seat. Don't talk to me in a fucking foreign language, you stupid ugly cow. As long as I can with this ugly, black bastard.
Now, I was particularly shocked because he was the kind of racist I really didn't think even existed anymore. There has, I imagine, been an awful lot of casual racism towards black and Asian people over the decades, which has mostly been educated out of people, even if it is, as many anti-racist campaigners claim, only on the surface. But there was nothing even remotely casual about this. This really was deliberately cruel and nasty, and intended to inflict as much pain and hurt as linguistically possible. This bloke really was a piece of work. Like I say, I didn't think arseholes like him still existed, but there's the proof. So, what's undeniable is that this guy really is a sack of shit of the very highest order. That's a given. But what does it say about everyone else on board? The video seemed to show, and all the accounts seem to confirm, that absolutely nobody intervened at all. Ryanair seemed to have been particularly useless in this regard, by not even informing the British police to be ready to take him into custody upon arrival at Gatwick, and anybody with even a shred of decency should head straight to EasyJet for their next holiday. I will. But what of the other passengers? The guy who filmed it all, who was on the radio the next day, can justifiably claim to have made the decision to either intervene or film it. It wouldn't have been easy or even possible to do both. Personally, I would have preferred him to have ejected that fat fuck from his seat and shoved his glasses down his hate-spewing throat. But then I suppose that we wouldn't have the video, and I wouldn't have had the satisfaction of seeing it. As it is, instead of seeing a disgusting racist get what he so richly deserved, I now have to digest the shameful spectacle of what exactly were my fellow compatriots doing. Well, they sure as hell weren't standing up. Of course I wasn't there, and I'm not going to do a Donald Trump and say that I would have acted heroically. But in this case, heroism wasn't required. This wasn't standing up to a gang of big, scary, tattooed Nazi skinheads on your own in the dead of night. It was one bloke, one out of shape, overweight, bespectacled, late middle-aged, pudgy-looking white man. What was required was a minimal amount of decency. And nobody, not one person, except the poor woman's daughter, had even the grace to intervene on her behalf. I mean, if we can't do the right thing when it was so easy, how on earth are we going to be able to do the right thing when it's difficult? Now, I don't approve of hate speech laws, but this is surely what most people would think of when they think of hate speech. If ever there was a cut and dry case, then surely this is it. This was speech deliberately designed to cause maximum emotional distress to a person regarding a physical attribute over which they have absolutely no control: the colour of their skin. If the hate speech were only ever used in cases like this, of which I'm sure there are very few, then I'll be perfectly happy with them. But even if I was happy with them, they would still be unnecessary, if only people would do the right thing. As it is, since these passengers quite demonstrably failed to do the right thing when it was so easy, and also so easy to recognise since it was so explicit, we now have hate speech laws. Laws that are so broadly written that they can now be used to prosecute anyone for almost anything that they utter. These cowardly and spineless passengers, indifferent to the suffering of a fellow citizen to the point of callousness, are the very reason we now have hate speech laws. They have failed to maintain our society, and the rest of us now have to pay for it. And pay for it we do, not just in hate speech laws and the corresponding diminution of our liberties that goes with them, but in the browbeating that we are constantly subjected to by the likes of Monroe Bergdorf, Rennie Edo Lodge, and my personal favourite, Yasmin Alibi Brown. Although on this evidence, you've got to concede, they may have a bloody point. Of course, it can always be said that in the cramped confines of the passenger cabin of a Boeing 737, with people moving around, putting luggage into overhead lockers, and the general hubbub of embarking passengers, anybody who was any distance away might not be able to discern the actual nature of the fracas. Well, that is feasible, but for those who were nearby and in adjacent rows, they can have no excuse. I've also heard it said that those passengers didn't intervene. They didn't intervene because they were racist, but because they were more concerned that the plane left on time, and that confronting any difficult passenger, no matter how despicable, was just not worth their precious time. Well, if anything, That's probably even worse, because that sums up the general bulk of the population's attitude to their own society in general. Of course, we'd like there to be no racism in society, but it's really rather inconvenient and time-consuming. At least racists have the courage of their convictions. These gutless morons thought, as usual, that standing up to this pathetic bully was just somebody else's job. I can see we've still got a mountain to climb, and in the meantime, we're in for another 5 years of Yasmin Alibi Brown telling us what racist shits we all are. When those passengers decided, actively decided, to do nothing, they were in fact doing something very, very specific. They were saying explicitly that they were not going to do the right thing. They failed to maintain their society.